Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the extra mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now your hosts, Jackson Mummy and Megan Saya from Celebration Bar Review.
Hey everybody, welcome. We are glad to have you here. It is Wednesday, October 20th. Hi Megan, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well today. I'm ready for Halloween. I think I'm just in that Halloween ready mode. And if your last name is Mummy, you better be, right?
That's true. You got to embrace the spooky season.
Yeah, that's it. All right. So spooky season for results for sure. We got some of those to talk about today. And we're going to be talking about some changes, some things happening in the bar exam. And then we are wrapping up our Anatomy of a Bar Exam essay with a discussion of the fact paragraph. I'm pretty excited about that. How about you?
Yeah, definitely. We've gotten some great feedback on this series, and I hope it's been really helpful for people. So looking forward to finishing that part up.
Yeah, so we're going to take you through and sort of put it all together, show you, as some of you are asking me, why are you talking about the facts last since you write them first? We'll explain why when we get into the slide deck, but we're pleased to be able to do that. And as Megan said, we've gotten great feedback from folks, so we are excited about that. Glad to have all of you here with us. Why don't I turn it over to you, Megan, and why don't you bring us up to date on what's going on around the bar exam world?
Yeah, definitely. So it's some good news this week, I think. For New York takers who are waiting for their results, we got word that they moved the release date up pretty significantly to November 10th. So by November 10th, they're saying. Which, fair warning, Jackson, could be 11:59 p.m. on the 10th, correct?
Yeah. In the old days, in the New York bar exam, they used to drop that email right around midnight. I don't know why, probably so that they wouldn't get too much pushback. But it was always weird because people would go to sleep and then get up the next morning and there's the email in their box, right, telling them what their results were. So it's not impossible that they would do that. I don't know that November 10th is the day of release. Right. They've said sometime before that or by that date. So it could be the 9th, it could be the 10th at midnight, it could be November 1st. You just don't really know. Historically, New York releases results at the end of October, beginning of November, which is why I thought my spidey sense was that they were going to jump on it. You had an interesting theory, which was that the New York examiners got in, started looking at the tape, the AI, potential mistakes or violations, and discovered it wasn't as extensive as they thought it was going to be, right?
Yeah, they were saying that was the reason for the delay in results. They weren't expecting them until mid-December, and that was because they were doing all of this online grading, which was just, they were saying, very different than the in-person grading. And so my assumption would be that now we're in mid to late October and it's just not taking as long as they thought it was going to get through everything. So they're going to be able to move up the release date pretty significantly. So great news, whatever the reason, great news for takers. It's going to be that turnaround for anyone, certainly who was unsuccessful on the exam, to be able to turn around and take the February exam. If you didn't even find out your results until mid-December, definitely suggest still study. If you took the New York bar in July and you think that you may have not been successful on it, you should be studying now already. But great to hear, regardless, that people will have the fair ability to be able to study for the February test if they need to.
Yeah, and I want to repeat what we said last week, because I think it applies in Georgia and California as well. If you think you were not successful on the exam in July, rather than waiting for your results to come out, you should probably begin your studies now. This is particularly true if you're a repeater. We're going to talk about some more results that we've gotten. But the trend is very clear. It's about a 20% pass rate across the country for repeat bar takers. So what that means, unfortunately, is that the odds are against you. And if you're a repeat bar taker and you took one of those three exams, New York, Georgia, California, you really don't want to wait until those results come out if you're planning on taking the February exam. It's possible to study, but man, you're talking about 40, 50, 60 hours a week in some of those situations. And that's really a brutal way to go through it. So I would encourage you, if you're in our course, you can keep studying automatically. It's one of the advantages of our course. If you're not in our course, please talk to us, and we've got ways to get you started in advance of getting your results. So I think it's important to do that. Otherwise, I think you just have to expect that you're going to get your results and you're going to have to sit out an exam and wait until February or July of 2022. July of 2022, isn't that crazy? We're talking about that.
It is. And speaking of July of 2022, also some good news, I think. Both Pennsylvania and Michigan have just announced that Pennsylvania did a little bit ago, I think, that they will be joining the UBE starting with the July 2022 exam. So great news if you are, I know we already, like the second it was announced, we started seeing some students in Michigan wanting to take the UBE. So really good news. It also means they have not, I don't believe that either one has yet said what their cut score is going to be officially. But once they do, keep an eye on that to see if that's a jurisdiction that you would like to waive into or be able to waive into. So yeah, really, I think we're up to 41 states now who do the UBE, which is pretty impressive.
It really is. So now what we've really got is sort of two warring camps, the way I think about it. We've got the UBE camp of 41 jurisdictions, and then we have the we're going to do it our own way camp, which includes California, Florida, Georgia, Wisconsin, which doesn't even give an exam, a handful of other states. But really, California, Florida, and Georgia are the big states that are outliers that are saying they're not going into the UBE. Now, there's one other interesting part of this, which is New York continues to make noises that they'd like to leave the UBE. I think they feel a little left out as a big state that all the other big boys are playing outside the UBE, and there they are with North Dakota and Wyoming and some tiny states. I don't know. I anthropomorphize. What's that word? I think about bar exam states like, that word. I think about those states as having personalities, but maybe they don't. In any event, I think it's really leading us towards what will come in 2025, 2026 with the new bar exam. And I think states are going to have to decide whether they want to be part of the new bar exam or they want to stay in their existing mold. And we're still a long way from that decision point, but you can certainly see the armies converging here of these two camps. And I don't know how it's going to go. I think it's going to be tough for the NCBE if they can't bring California, Florida, Georgia, maybe New York into the fold with them. But, who knows? It's crazy stuff, really.
Yeah. So anyway, for right now, I think it's really good news for students. Gives more portability with your score, makes the test just much more streamlined, simplified in my mind. So yeah, so good news if you are wanting to be in one of those jurisdictions and have been unable to do the UBE.
And those are two pretty big states. Yeah, two pretty big states. So changing that exam from their state exam to the UBE, in every state we've seen it, that's been a good thing, and it has helped pass rates. If you've been a Pennsylvania bar taker, and we see a lot of those up in the Northeast, if you've been a Michigan bar taker, now you've got another big jurisdiction to look at. So check that out. And again, for those of you taking those exams, we'll say what we've always said, they're not state specific. You'll take the same bar exam in Michigan that they give in New York and that they give in Colorado and they give in Wyoming and everywhere else. So interesting stuff.
Great. All right. Next with results, we had a few results come out this week. Pennsylvania, South Carolina, and Virginia. And then, of course, Texas released their statistics. The results had come out the week before, but we were waiting to see the numbers. So, Jackson, anything we can glean from those?
It was another in this long line of bad results for repeaters. Texas has a repeat pass rate of 21%. There were 111 who passed. There were repeaters out of 415 failed. So really tough exam. And it really plays out the out-of-state attorneys, the in-state law schools. It didn't really matter. I mean, it was just bad. It's a train wreck across the board for everyone. And when we continue to see this failure rate or pass rate of 21%, it really tells me that if you're a repeat bar taker, you just cannot wander into the exam, right? Texas is a state that only gives you 5 tries to start with. And I just get so anxious when I talk to people who are coming to us and they say, well, I've taken the Texas bar 3 times or 4 times, and I'm thinking I'll just do the same thing, but more of it. And, that isn't going to work. I mean, it really isn't going to work. And you see these numbers and it's very clear that it's not working. When we look at Illinois' repeat taker rate of 17% and Florida's at 21%, and Missouri's at 20%. I mean, Alabama's at 15%. You just got to start thinking to yourself, if you're a repeat bar taker, you better up your game significantly. And I will say, I've been pleased that so many of our students who had to repeat have done just that. They've added the coaching with you. They've added time management with Brianna. They've added tools like photo reading and paraliminals. They're sitting for the Abundance for Bar Study Masterclass. All of these are ways to assist in passing the exam. But I will just continue to say, if you're a repeat bar taker and all you're going to do is show up and you think you're just going to study the way you've studied in the past and you expect to pass, man, the odds are way against you. You're better off going to Las Vegas and putting your money on red. I mean, there's just no way that you're going to make it in a 1 out of 5 scenario. And we're seeing this consistently. Every big state is hitting the same numbers, which makes me think when we get to California, Georgia, and New York, I mean, do you think they're going to be much better than 20% repeat pass rate?
Sure. Yeah, definitely not. It is really interesting how consistent the numbers are. I think that's been really fascinating this cycle to see that. Again, I know I'm like a broken record on this, but the graders do not know that you're a repeater. So these numbers are not due to some kind of a quota, right? They don't know, oh, we can only let in maybe about 20% max repeaters. That's not the case. And so there's more something fundamentally that for whatever reason, 15 to 25-ish% of repeaters they change something, they start to understand something, but the rest of the people are still missing something fundamentally about the test, right? Like not, and I don't think it's a inability to do it. I think there's a disconnect somewhere of people who are not understanding maybe fundamentally what the test is asking them to do or how to go about preparing for it. And so they are just working really hard and studying really hard, but still not making those connections. I do think it's really interesting and really making me feel like we want to tell all of you guys, like, please, like, try something different with us. I know it's scary. I know it's hard, but like these numbers are showing that it's not a matter of like, if I just study a little bit harder, then I'll be fine. Like there is something fundamentally like that you might need to alter about the way you approach the test.
Yeah. A while back, I did a series of separate videos on 6 keys to the pass list, and we got great response to that. And so what we decided to do was to combine those and edit a little bit and turn them into one webinar, which is an on-demand webinar, in which we go through those 6 keys, the things that are keeping repeat bar takers from being successful. It was built on a 2-year study done in the New York Bar Examiners Commission. It's highly fact specific. It's very detailed about the specific things. It's very directive about what you have to do. And we've made that available as a free webinar. We will link up to it. And if you haven't seen the 6 keys, I really encourage you to do this. It's the longest webinar I've ever done. It's 100 minutes long. So I'll just say that to begin with. But it's on demand, so you can hit the pause button, go to the bathroom, come back and watch it. But I've gotten incredibly positive response from people who've been through it because they end up saying, oh, I see now what's happening in my life that's causing me to not be successful. And it's not that people aren't, as you said, it's not that they're not smart enough or that they don't work hard enough or that they don't care enough. It's none of those things. But there are a variety of findings, things that we've learned that really make it clear that there's a ceiling for some people. And if they just keep doing the same thing, they're never going to get through that ceiling. They're not going to punch through it. So I really encourage you to look at those things and then not just look at them, but make a decision, take some action. do something different. So that's what we talk about all the time, because that's when we're seeing people pass, is when they just make that commitment to do something different. We've got some interviews lined up with some of our successful bar takers, people that are repeaters that pass in the cycle so far. I know we'll get more as we get into these other states as well, but I'm anxious always to share those stories, because the consistent theme is always that, isn't it, Megan? They did something more. They figured out a way to push through.
Yeah, and just ask that for the people who've been able to make major point jumps, what allowed the jump? And I think it is and I'm curious to hear your answer, Jackson, but I see a lot of people who I worked with on their writing last year who had, oh my goodness, one of my students in New York, what she had, how many, I don't want to say the wrong number of points.
85 scale points.
Yeah, I mean, it was incredible.
85 scale points, it's an unreal number.
And it was literally like, I work with people on not just, hey, write X, Y, Z, but how are you putting it together? What's the tone? Who's your, like, the way you think about and approach your writing. And I know that probably sounds really silly and weird, because it's like, who cares? But there's mind shifts that I believe have to occur with your writing that make the huge difference between the way you approach your writing that gives you a 4 or a 5, let's say if you're in the UBE, right, or a 6 versus a 2 or a 3, right? And it's not necessarily like, oh, because you had so much of, you just knew the material so much better. It's often a shift in the deeper and better understanding of like, what's the point of the test? What am I trying to do? What's my goal or my objective, right? So kind of basic, but really important.
It is. I think the personal writing workshop is a big deal. I put that up in the offer tab as well. I think photo reading is another tool that really helps people get big jumps. And so we encourage that. About 2/3 of our students use photo reading. So I think it's a big tool to help. I think getting the coaching beyond the personal writing workshop, doing the personal coaching with Megan or the personal coaching with me, between the two of us, we have mentored thousands and thousands of students successfully. And we know what works and what doesn't work. Hopefully we've given you a little bit of a sense of that in this Anatomy of a Bar essay series. And I encourage you to watch. If you haven't watched the previous episodes, make sure you check them out. If you're in our course, you will find them in the course platform. If you're not in our course, you'll see them out there. We've sent some emails out to folks, and we've linked up to it in our podcasts. But these are really the distilled gems of what we teach in the writing. I don't think it's quite the same as having someone look at your specific work, right, and say, here's what I see in this particular piece of writing. But it is the parameters or the outlines of what the writing should be. And consistently, when we see people being able to move their writing, because that's the subjective part of the exam, it can make a huge difference in the overall scores. I find for most people, we can get a gain in the essay part probably more easily in many cases than we can in the objective part, because the objective test is pretty rigid. It tends to lock people in. And unless we can get them into photo reading and selective intuition, which can then make a huge difference, but that's a big mind shift to do. The writing piece is where I think you can see immediate gains. So it's a great question. I hope that helps with some of the response.
Yeah. And one last question before we get to our Anatomy of a Bar exam. It's a great question. This student says, I'm from Puerto Rico. I want to tell you that my biggest problem is the language. I read and speak English, but I don't know how to write it correctly. I want to prepare to take the UBE in July 2022. So I'm interested first to have access to the site to get the writing course as well as the books together with the UBE guide. I'm aware that I need help on how to write correctly. If there's a Spanish-speaking person who can communicate with me, I would appreciate it.
Let me take the last question first. We don't have anyone on our staff that is Spanish speaking, although we've got plenty of people who speak Spanish that have taken and passed the course. And they're in our Facebook group, and they're obviously able to help and glad to participate. The reason that we don't go out and specifically look for someone that speaks Spanish is because the bar exam is given in English. And I take a decidedly old school view that because the exam is given in English, we have to do everything in English. That if we facilitate the use of Spanish, unfortunately, it becomes a barrier to the work you really have to do. And I know that's tough love. And I know that there are people that are like, well, why wouldn't you just speak to me in Spanish about it? The answer is, then you've got to translate, and we don't want that. We want you to get used to English. So there are a couple of things that we recommend for non-English speakers. One of them, very simply, is to put yourself in as close to an English-only bubble for the time you're studying for the bar exam as you can. That is, speak English, read English, watch English television. And there are lots of people, for example, here where I am in Central Florida, you could speak Spanish all day long to everyone you see, inside and outside, the store, everywhere. I mean, it's certainly possible, but you shouldn't do it if you're trying to take the bar exam. You've got to get to I'd like you to get to the point where you're dreaming in English. So I think that's one thing you definitely want to do. A second thing is that some people will need some coaching on English grammar. And a community college course in English grammar, freshman English course, is a good course to take. We've got some students that have done that. I've seen great improvement in their grammar and in their writing. It's challenging for them, for sure, but I think it makes a big difference. So I would encourage you to do that as well. Now, remember that in the course, you're reading in English, you're listening to the lectures and watching them, you're reading them on the screen while I'm talking or Megan's talking. So you're getting additional reinforcement in English, and then you're doing the question practice in English. So all of those things are helping, and the practice, I think, makes a difference, don't you, in terms of English proficiency?
Yeah, definitely. It's like immersion. If you think of it, pretend like you're studying abroad or something, right? And you go to another country, and which many of our non-native English speakers are living in another country right now, and you just want to surround yourself with just that one language for this brief moment, because it's really the best way to learn it and get comfortable with it. For sure, as soon as the bar is done, you'll go back to everything that you're used to. But it's very much the quickest, easiest way that you're going to get comfortable enough with the bar in English right now is to just immerse yourself in the language. Languages are really hard for me, so I have so much empathy and sympathy. I would never be able to take the bar exam in another language.
Yeah, I remember when you were in Japan for months, right? And you immersed yourself in Japanese, and that's hard to do, right? Very challenging. But yeah, I mean, this is challenging. And you deserve all the respect in the world if you're taking the bar exam in a language that is not your first language. We have lots of people, however, who have done it successfully. It sometimes takes them longer, I'm not going to lie. But here's the other part that I really encourage for non-English speakers. Use photo reading. It is an amazing tool because you're photo reading English. It's going to your non-conscious brain. Your brain is doing the translation and giving it back to you, and you're not going through the conscious process of doing that. And so I find photo reading to be extremely effective for non-English speakers. And you can see that where we've done interviews with successful bar takers. A number of them, particularly Spanish speakers, used photo reading, and it really opened up the language for them in ways that they didn't expect. So that's another thing you can do. But I'm really excited that student was willing to reach out and say, here's what I've got to try and do some. I need some help. I need some coaching in the writing. I need some other things. This is the process that we're trying to get people into to understand what it takes to pass an exam, whether it's Florida or the UBE or California. It doesn't really matter. It's a tough exam. So.
Great.
We're going to finish up the anatomy of a bar essay today, as I said. Then next week, I don't know, man. I hope I'm not crazy for doing this. I have found the 10 hardest MBE questions of all time. Based on our data points, and we have a lot of data points, we know how people have done on every actual bar question, MBE question, that's been released by the examiners. We have statistical analysis. And Megan and I, in a moment of insanity, said, let's take the 10 hardest questions and we'll count up from number 10 to number 1, and we will literally work through the 10 toughest MBE questions. Now, we're not sure today how many episodes that's going to take us, but we're going to take those 10 questions and we're going to brush up during the week, get ourselves ready, and then we're going to tackle those one at a time. So that should be fun in a weird kind of, I hope I don't embarrass myself way, but I know you can handle it, but man, it's a lot of pressure to get these questions right.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to that. I think it'll be good. I think the MBE questions are, they're just their own beast. That's for sure. So we'll take our time.
We're going to show you how we break them down. We're going to get into substance here. So this should be fascinating. And some of these questions have a success rate of like 10%, 14%. Nothing had better than 35%. So these are pretty tough questions. And when you talk about thousands of people taking them and only 10% or 20% getting them right, that there's something about that question that's just a bear to deal with. So there you go.
Yeah, great. All right. With all that being said, I think we're ready to get into our fact pattern. How do we write that fact paragraph?
So you recall that in our previous lessons, we've talked about looking at the argument section of an essay and the conclusion section, and we even talked about the overall analysis of an essay. And we're going to take the same question that we've been using, our UBE criminal law question, and today we're going to look at the first paragraph, which is the fact paragraph. And I'll explain, as I said, in a minute, why we did this one last, even though it's the first paragraph you write. I think it fits in better when you understand where the argument and the conclusion are going. So let's jump into this. What I'm going to do is actually read the question to you again. We've talked about it the last couple of weeks. If you're familiar with that, this will be a review. If you haven't heard it before, you can listen or watch, and we encourage you to watch this so that you can see what we're talking about. But here's our question, and here it is in the first paragraph. A police officer on routine traffic patrol watched suspect drive by. Suspect was in compliance with all applicable traffic laws except the state seatbelt law. The state motor vehicle code provides that police officers have discretion to make an arrest for any traffic infraction, including the violation of the state seatbelt law. Officer had never stopped a driver merely for violating the seatbelt law. However, officer knew that suspect was a reputed drug dealer and stopped suspect's vehicle, hoping to uncover evidence of a more serious crime. Now, I'm going to stop there for a minute just to point out that when we're thinking about facts, very often in a question, you will find that each paragraph of the question either corresponds directly to a call of the question or has its own sort of storyline or fact pattern in it. And as we've talked about in previous weeks, Megan, this paragraph has a lot of facts to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely does. There's a lot of things in here that should definitely be pinging for you, right? Making you think, I might not know where this is going to be important, but it feels important.
Absolutely. And so part of our challenge in the fact paragraph is going to be able to condense or paraphrase that. So as you're watching or listening to these paragraphs, think to yourself, how would I summarize that paragraph if I had to? You're not going to have time to do a summary and then write it, but you want to be thinking in that direction. All right, well, let's go to paragraph number 2. Officer directed suspect to get out of his vehicle, handcuffed suspect, and told suspect that he was under arrest for violating the seatbelt law. Immediately afterward, officer looked through the driver's side car window and noticed a clear plastic bag containing white powder on the front seat of suspect's car. Officer asked suspect, "Are those drugs yours?" And suspect responded, "No, that cocaine isn't mine." Officer then opened the car door and removed the bag of white powder. Now, notice what's happening. We're actually getting a story being told from start to finish, and it's linear, right? And that's generally the case in a bar essay question, that we move from one event to the next event rather than a series of disconnected events. Do you agree?
Yeah, generally speaking, yes, which is always helpful. And don't fight it. When you have a fact pattern that's telling you a story, use that to your advantage in your essay rather than trying to jumble it up or sort of make the task harder for yourself.
Absolutely. And you'll see how this all plays out when we get to some of the calls of the question. All right, let's go to the third paragraph. Officer transported suspect to the police station for booking. An hour later, detective visited suspect in the police station holding cell to attempt an interview. Detective read suspect his Miranda rights. Suspect stated that he understood his Miranda rights, but nonetheless would answer detective's questions. Suspect voluntarily answered detective's questions for about 5 minutes and then said, "I'm not sure about this. Maybe I need a lawyer." Detective did not seek clarification of suspect's statement, but continued to question suspect, who ultimately confessed to possessing the cocaine found in his car. So again, the storyline's being advanced. We've gone from the stop to the initial arrest to now being taken to the station house. And you can see that the problem is creating more complexity. It's interweaving. We've got another incident of the Miranda problem showing up here. And it's very important to keep in mind the distinctions between these paragraphs. I mean, one of them is the second Miranda attempt, but the other is that we've now got someone called detective versus someone called officer. And those subtleties are oftentimes missed, aren't they?
Yeah, it's why I know you always suggest to people that they write down just really quickly the players and the problems, the conflicts, right? Because you want to make sure it's all clear in your head and you actually have a good understanding of what is actually happening factually in that question.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And if you're getting confused, I mean, just jot it down, make a note, go into if you're on, well, I guess we're all going to be live in-person exams, but you'll still be on your computer. So you should have some opportunity for note taking. But whatever that form of your note taking is, make sure that you're being clear on those things. All right, the next paragraph is what we call the tee it up paragraph. You don't always see these, but I love them when they exist. And the paragraph says that the state charged suspect with misdemeanor violation of the seatbelt law and the felony drug possession. Suspect is now moved to suppress all the state's evidence, alleging an unlawful stop, an unlawful arrest, an unlawful seizure of evidence, and multiple Miranda violations. And Megan, as we've said before, these are good things to just sort of number or separate in your own mind, and seeing the fact that there are multiple Miranda violations gives you a reason to think there might be multiple questions around that, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so now you've got the tee-up question, and now we come to the actual call of the question, which is not all that different than the paragraph before, but it's now explicit. So here's the 4 calls of the question. The first is, did the traffic stop and subsequent arrest violate suspect's constitutional rights? Explain. The second is, did the officer's seizure of evidence from the suspect's car violate the suspect's constitutional rights? Explain. Third is, did the officer's questioning of the suspect violate the suspect's Miranda rights? Explain. And then finally, should suspect's confession to detective be suppressed? And the word explain. I've read the word explain each time in there because the examiners put that in because I think it's pretty important to them that you don't just give an answer, but that you actually try and explain your reasoning, right? That you do more than just say suspect constitutional rights were violated or they weren't, right? You have to give something more than that.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And so this is just a reminder from the examiners, hey, show your work. Now, when it comes time to show your work, that's more than just the result, the conclusion or the application paragraph. And so now I want to put it into the context of a couple of different arguments taken from this essay. And the way that I want to start is by talking about the importance of the fact paragraph. Facts literally are the foundation. They are the groundwork for everything that's going to come. And the reason that we wanted to talk about facts last, even though we're going to write them first, is that now that we've given you the arguments and the conclusions, I think you're going to see how important the facts are to everything that came earlier. It's going to sort of lay in there and you're going to go, oh, that's why I needed the facts. And maybe when we were talking about those other pieces in previous weeks, you've gone, as a listener or a watcher, I don't understand. Why did they pick that? It's because of the importance of facts. They are the key to everything you do, even though they're not the biggest part of the answer. Do you agree with that?
Oh, definitely. I think they really can be helpful. I think people forget that or kind of neglect that. They are a tool for you as you distill the facts down to, just as you're going to talk about, just a couple of sentences. I think it helps you get a good grasp of what's actually important in this conflict and to be able to answer it well. And I think people kind of forget that to their detriment.
Yeah, and it really is to their detriment, because if you skip the facts, if you think, facts don't matter, it's really going to hurt what you do, and it's going to hurt the understanding of the reader to get what's going on in the problem. Now, the FLA process itself, just as a quick review, is built around 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph is the facts paragraph. You always have to have them. And this comes up a lot, doesn't it, Megan, where people say, well, I was running out of time, so I just skipped the facts.
Yeah, certainly. But I think the point is that the facts should really only take you a minute or two to write. So there's really
Absolutely.
never a reason to not have any facts in there.
Absolutely. And once you've developed the facts, then the next step is to make a legal argument. And that legal argument is going to be based on the facts that you actually developed. So there's a logical conclusion or a following from it. It's easier to write about the argument if you set it up factually than it is to say, what are all the elements, or what are all the rules, or what did I memorize? There is a process that follows here that I developed a long time ago because I found that people couldn't remember everything. But if they went from the facts, it was, oh, yeah, that fact's important. I can write from there. Okay. And then from the legal argument, we get to the application. So that's the conclusion, who wins and why. And you can see that there's a logical progression, just like there is in the essay question, of going from the facts to the argument to the application. Megan, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think this is hopefully pretty clear to people.
Okay, so now we could view this FLA process a different way, and there's lots of visual ways to do it, but I thought this might be helpful. When you talk about the fact paragraph, it is going to be typically 1 to 2 sentences long. So it is not very lengthy. You don't have to put a lot in here. In fact, the goal is to summarize or paraphrase, not to repeat word for word verbatim. And you see that, don't you, where people take the whole paragraph and they just repeat it and drop it into the essay.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's very tempting to use a lot of direct quotes, which you really only want to do if there's something really important about the actual words that were used, or they want to put in exact numbers. Again, if it's really important that it was 12,000 instead of 15,000, then sure. But if it doesn't really matter that it happened on March 1st versus March 25th, don't worry about putting in all those specifics like that.
Exactly. So we'll see how this plays out here in just a minute. Then we could think about the next step as being the legal argument. And as we've talked about previously, the legal argument is typically 3 or 4 sentences long. It's party A's argument followed by the law, and then party B's argument and followed by the law. So you're only talking 3 or 4 sentences, but still a bigger piece than the facts. And so you can see it starts to grow from that. And then the application paragraph is interesting because it varies. Sometimes it's longer because there's just more detail and there's more nuance. And sometimes it can be a shorter piece. It's a little bit like a balloon. It can shrink or grow. But in general, I find that this is a good visual representation of how your essay answer should look. A short fact section, a little bit longer legal argument, and potentially a big application. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. This is the ideal for sure. Facts are real brief, do it. The legal argument, that 3 to 4 sentence paragraph that you're not adding a lot of extra detailing yet. And then that application that should certainly take up most of your time and your writing and your effort as you explain your work.
Okay. So now what we want to do is think about the advantages of writing about the facts, because probably the most common reaction I get from people to this writing system as regards facts is they say, I didn't have time, or I didn't feel like I should repeat the facts, or the examiner said, don't repeat the facts. But here's why using the facts are important. I think there are at least 4 advantages. The first is that it creates a writing style that's predictable and consistent. If you always start every section of your answer with 1 or 2 sentences of the facts, you get the reader into a rhythm with you. They begin to get into the flow of the writing. It makes your writing predictable and consistent, and that tends to be viewed more favorably by the examiners because they know what they're looking for, right? I mean, as you read essays, Megan, sometimes it's like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. You don't know where you're going next.
Yeah, I always try to tell people that when you're giving the facts in this paragraph, it's kind of like highlighting for your reader. Hey, here's what I want you to have at the front of your mind as you go into this conflict. Here's what I want you to be thinking about. What I want you it's like a little preview of this is what we're going to be talking about right now.
Yeah. And so it's nice to have that. A second advantage is that really what happens is your answer starts to build logically. You set up the facts, now you're making an argument, then you're reasoning to a conclusion. That logical process is important. It's easier for you as a writer if you're working logically, and it's certainly easier for the reader, isn't it?
Yeah, if you think of it like a math problem, right? I always talk about how with the application, it's the showing your work part, right? If you're in long division and you're actually showing step by step, the facts are like the equation, right? We need to have some context. We need to know what we're dealing with. So if it's 35 plus 24, it sounds so simple, but write out the equation before you start solving it, right? This is just the facts are giving that equation. Don't just jump into solving it. What are we solving, right?
Yeah. And sometimes answers just don't have that logical approach to them, and they don't score as well. So it's a simple approach. A third advantage for me is you avoid wasted words. So often people overwrite the facts section. They add words that they don't need, and then they get into a discussion of something that's an issue, not a dispute. And there's so many wasted words. You can write a successful essay. We know this from the results. A successful UBE essay, 30 minutes at 750 words. You can write a successful 1 hour essay at about 1,100 words. You can write a 45-minute essay at about 900 words. And that's a whole lot less than an issue spotter would put into their answer, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And issue spotters have to work so much harder for no real gain. So it avoids wasted words. And then the final advantage is that, in my mind, this demonstrates legal reasoning. You are literally showing the reader your work, as Megan said. You're taking them step by step through everything you're doing, and you're showing the balance. On the one hand, on the other hand, you're helping the reader see how you think through a problem. And you can't do that unless you have some factual grounding, right? If you just start throwing out legal concepts that are not grounded in anything, then it's just chaos to the reader. Having discussed that, let's see what comes up here next. Oh, yes. Okay. So now what we want to do in the writing is we want you to start with the facts, but I've got kind of an interesting parenthetical there. I say, or you could start with the facts, or you could write them last and then move them to the beginning. Here's what I mean. I think for most people, writing the fact paragraph first and then going to the legal arguments and then the application is the logical approach. In my mind, that just makes sense. You just go from A to B to C. But I've also discovered over the years that some people like to make the arguments first in their own mind, write those out, reach their conclusion, and then ask themselves this really interesting question. What facts do I need to set that up? And then they draft their fact paragraph and they just insert it at the beginning of the FLA system. Do you know applicants or students that do that?
Yeah. And what I love is that I think it's so indicative of our course philosophy as a whole, which is this is not a rule book per se, right? We want you to take what is working for you, what feels positive and helpful, and use that. And if there's something and don't push back on something just because it's different, but if there's a different way of you think about it, your brain works a little differently than mine, that's not a problem, right? So go with what is working well for you. It's another reason why the writing conferences are so helpful, because you can figure it out where you send something to me or to Jackson and we can talk to you about, hey, this is, yes, great. That approach yielded a good result. Go for it. Or we will be honest with you if we say, I know you are resisting this and I know you want to do it this other way. It's not getting you where you need to be. Can we find another solution, maybe somewhere in between that works better, right? So it's really helpful for finding your specific way of writing.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. All right. So ultimately, when we're talking about facts, there are three things that I want you to remember as you're writing the story of the fact pattern in that first paragraph. Remember that you want to keep it brief, 1 or 2 sentences. This does not need to be lengthy. Don't overwrite this paragraph. Secondly, keep it relevant. We don't need all of the facts of the problem. So in our criminal law problem, I don't need all of the facts about the Miranda stop when we're talking about the stop and subsequent arrest. In other words, stay focused just on the part of that call of the question. So this is why you don't write one huge fact paragraph and then just say see infra or see supra, right? You want to be tiny, short, focused. And third, keep it focused. So keep it relevant to the problem and keep it focused on the problem that you're going to write about, which is why I say for some people, they like to write paragraph 2 and 3, and then they say, oh, these are the facts that I needed, and they drop those in as paragraph 1. So keep it brief, keep it relevant, keep it focused. All right. So now, having done that, we've said this in every single lesson. Don't make this more complicated than necessary. We have made it as simple as we think we can. So I want to show you how it now plays out in our fact pattern. You remember that question 1 had to do with the stop and subsequent arrest. So now I want to identify for you what a typical facts paragraph would look like. And there's lots of ways to write it, but here's how I would write it. A police officer on routine traffic patrol watched suspect drive by. Suspect was in compliance with all applicable traffic laws except the state seatbelt law. Officer knew that the suspect was a reputed drug dealer and stopped suspect's vehicle, hoping to uncover evidence of a more serious crime. Not very long, is it, Megan?
Right, exactly. But it gives you so much to build on, right? You can see from that already, oh, here's the direction that we're going to head.
Yeah. And that's now giving me the impetus for the argument. And as we talked about in previous discussions, and I'm not going to read it verbatim, but our argument here was that the suspect was going to say it was a pretextual stop and violated the Fourth Amendment generally. And then the officer would say, no, it wasn't because you violated the seatbelt law and I have probable cause. And so I can go ahead and stop you. So we're now basing our argument on the facts, right? The facts helped focus us in, and now we can get to the argument. We're not talking about everything, right, that relates to traffic stops and searches, but we're pretty focused on this problem.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So now from there, we go to our application paragraph. Who wins? Well, as you've heard, the officer's stop and arrest didn't violate the suspect's constitutional rights. Why? Because the officer had probable cause and, based on his personal observations, believed the suspect was committing a traffic violation, and the state statute permits an arrest. And then we finish up that application paragraph with additional facts, law, and argument. So we had some additional facts here about the idea that it might have been a pretext. We could talk about the fact that officers never arrested anyone before for this violation, but nonetheless, it doesn't matter because he violated the seatbelt law, and that's all we need to have there. So you can see how everything flows from the facts. If we don't have the facts, we could go all over the place, couldn't we?
Yeah, and I just want to point out again how in this application, you're bringing in some new facts that you haven't put in the beginning. Sometimes people feel very boxed in, like, oh, if I didn't talk about the fact that officer, let's say, had never arrested someone or never pulled anyone over for the seatbelt law, oh, if I don't talk about it in the fact paragraph, then I can't bring it up. Absolutely untrue. You don't want to go into that level of detail in the fact paragraph, but you probably do want to talk about that kind of stuff in the application. So the application is where you're going to end up bringing in more of the story as you tell it. But the fact paragraph is just a very, like you said, very focused on this very specific conflict. But don't be afraid to bring in more facts that help aid your argument in the application paragraph.
Yeah. Let me go through these other two questions pretty quickly. I think we've made the point here. But in question 2, we've got the problem of Miranda. And so our facts tell us that suspect voluntarily answered detectives' questions for 5 minutes and then said, I'm not sure about this. Maybe I need a lawyer. Detective didn't seek clarification of the statement, but continued to question the suspect, who ultimately confessed to possessing the cocaine. So now you see, just from the facts, what question we're going to answer. It's clearly going to be this second Miranda problem, but it's around the concept of requesting Sixth Amendment assistance of counsel. And so the argument here, again, would be the suspect would argue that he revoked his waiver, and he said he needed an attorney to be present when he said, maybe I need a lawyer. And then we've got the rule that if there's an unambiguous and unequivocal request for an attorney, the police have to stop the interrogation. And then the detective's argument that the request was ambiguous. So again, we've got that form of the argument where there's just one rule of law kind of sandwiched in the middle. And from that, we get to the application. Who wins? The statements won't be suppressed because they were given after a voluntary valid waiver and no valid revocation was made by the suspect. That's because the suspect's statement that he might want or maybe needs an attorney was too ambiguous. And in terms of additional facts, law, and arguments, the suspect's confession when he said, maybe I need a lawyer, isn't going to be suppressed because the Sixth Amendment has to be clear and unequivocal. So again, we've taken that fact paragraph and now we've expanded and gone a little bit deeper, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I just want to point out real quick that there's a direct quote in this fact paragraph. That's because the direct quote is vital to answering this question. I would not quote it directly if the language wasn't important, but it was just sort of the sentiment. But in this case, that I'm not sure about this, maybe I need a lawyer, is key to determining whether or not it was unequivocal request.
Yeah, we need the actual words there. So in that case, we do it. Absolutely. Good point. And then very quickly, the final question. The officer arrested suspect, and officer asked suspect, are those drugs yours? And suspect responded, no, that cocaine isn't mine. Officer then opened the car door and removed the bag of white powder. We know what we're going to talk about now, right? I mean, it's going to be this actual seizure of the evidence and whether or not there was a Miranda violation. So the suspect will say that his statement, again, we're quoting, no, that cocaine isn't mine, should be excluded because he wasn't given a Miranda warning. And then we tell the reader what the Miranda rule is. And then we've got the officer's argument that the suspect waived his rights by making a voluntary statement. So our fact paragraph sets up our arguments, which leads us to the application. And here it's pretty clear the suspect will be able to exclude the statements. Why? Because there was a custodial interrogation and the suspect wasn't read his Miranda rights. It's a very straightforward process. And then the additional facts and law and arguments are that when he asked him, are the drugs yours? He didn't first provide Miranda warnings. So again, you can see how the facts really provide the foundation for each of these pieces of the answer, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. 3 final things to keep in mind about facts. One is it's called a fact pattern, not an issue pattern. So don't issue spot. There you go. Okay. Don't go down the rabbit hole. The second thing is that facts are clearly important. As you've seen, we build on them, we grow. Everything comes from the facts. And finally, the third thing is don't overdo it and don't repeat. You don't need to do too much with this. And that's why we saved it for last, because we really don't want you getting overworked with the facts and overwriting them. They're simply there to help give you a focus and to give your writing a focus. And then ultimately, when you do that, that's the FLA writing system. So there you go, right? Okay, let me jump back in here. And yeah, there we are. I'm back. Okay. Wow, we did it. And I think we're almost on time. I hope that this was helpful for people. I think when you look at all 4 videos together and you see how you analyze a problem, you look at the facts, you look at the argument, you look at the conclusion, you can see how you can literally take any question and disassemble it, put it back together, and really come up with a successful answer.
Yeah, exactly. Certainly, if anybody has any questions about it, let us know, email us. If anyone wants to work on their writing, we are here to help you with that for sure.
Absolutely. This has been a fun series to do, and thank you for joining me for that. I hope it's been helpful to all of you. Again, next week, we are going to take the 10 hardest MBE questions of all time. Terrified. And we will work our way through those one at a time. So we're going to do it like number 10, number 9, number 8. Should be fun. And we'll see how that goes. Hope everybody has a good study week. We're now just outside the 4-month window to the February exams. So you should be underway and working consistently. And for those who are waiting for their July results, hang in there. You still got probably another couple weeks until we get some more big results coming out. But in the meantime, we will be here and glad to have all of you with us. Thank you for being here, Megan. Thank you, June, for being on the chat box. Thanks to all of you who are with us live today. And we will see you next week when we come back to do our next version of the Q&A webinar with the 10 toughest MBE questions of all time. All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening and watching the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at celebrationbarreview.com.